There are many things about our world that are different right now.
The way we work.
The way we live.
And why we give.
One thing remains the same.
What we do together today
determines how we live united tomorrow.
The way Central Ohio rallied this year to help others is proof. Thanks to our generous donors, our Community Response Fund quickly reached more than $2 million.
It helps support more than 70 local not-for-profits and thousands of our neighbors in need.
But as this crisis continues, there's so much work to do.
It's the tough work.
The work that'll be needed to provide relief.
So our community can begin to recover and rebuild.
It's the very work that the United Way of Central Ohio does every day.
And has been doing for nearly 100 years.
We feed people facing food insecurity.
We connect people in crisis to resources that help pay bills and keep them in their homes.
We help prepare children for success in school, work, and life.
In a year that's been hard for many,
you can make a difference.
Give today to help people facing challenges with basic needs and education.
Give today to provide families relief and hope.
Give today to United Way's Community Response Fund.
Because what we do together today,
together today
determines how we live united.
United
tomorrow.
Excellent. Good afternoon. My name is Aja Davis. I'm the Director of Individual Giving and Donor Stewardship at United Way of Central Ohio. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for the session, Leaders United, Leading the Way for a More Equitable Community. I'd like to start by introducing our illustrious panel. We have Aaron Upchurch, MSSA, LISWS, Executive Director at Kaleidoscope Youth Center. We have LaShawn Carter, Assistant Director, Chief DEI Officer at Franklin County Children's Services, and Lena Tenney, Coordinator of Public Engagement at the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity, Race and Cognitive Program. Thank you, panelists, for being here this afternoon and sharing your knowledge and experience on this topic. I want to first give a little background information about the purpose of this panel and what we hope to accomplish today. United Way of Central Ohio is introducing a new volunteer and donor engagement opportunity, Leaders United. It's focused on individuals who, in partnership with United Way, wish to mobilize their personal talent and interests to lead change in our community. An instance of success for this level of engagement is the E3 program that has successfully led a charge of educating, empowering, and elevating by helping women achieve a more livable, sustaining wage. This program elevates the reality that donors have many opportunities to enroll in the Central Ohio community. They can be fundraisers, program designers, mentors, workshop leaders. The opportunities are endless. By the end of this panel, we hope that you are encouraged to tap in to your network, your talents and treasures, and really make impact in our community. So I'd like to kick it off to our panels first here with the first question. We'll get right into it. If you all could share what community organizations you're currently aligned with. Tell me a little bit how you became to be involved with them. We'll start with you, Lena.
Thank you so much for having me. So my primary sort of formal affiliation right now is with a group called Trans Ohio. That's all one word with the O capitalized. And this is a statewide nonprofit organization that is by and for trans people, advocating for our community, educating those around us, such as our allies and family and friends, as well as seeking to influence things like legislation that could better protect trans persons specifically here within our state, in addition to connecting folks to resources such as free legal advice to get your name changed legally, and perhaps even the funds to do that, since it's a bit of an expensive process for many folks. Other than that, most of my work is work at the Kirwan Institute, and then the other things that I'm doing are extremely informal and loose. I've been at a number of mass gatherings downtown within the last couple of months. So not necessarily any specific group affiliation, but just trying to help the folks downtown who have been protesting.
Erin, do you want to weigh in?
So my most formal affiliation, the one that pays my bills and my day job, is Kaleidoscope Youth Center. We are the largest and longest standing organization in the state of Ohio that is serving LGBTQIA+ youth and young adults. We're in our 26th year. We've got community-based programming, we've got center-based programming. We're most known for our drop-in center for ages 12 to 20. We have a housing and case management program, the first of which in Central Ohio, that centers the needs and experiences of LGBTQIA+ youth. We've got some civic engagement and advocacy, and we do education and community education or outreach. So we got our hands on a lot of different things across the state to create safer, affirming environments that offer belonging and community to our young people. Outside of that, I like to say I'm a free agent of sorts. I like to float. I've got lots of different connections and relationships. I think relationships are the key here in this community. So I don't have any really other formal affiliations per se, but my name and my face will pop up in a lot of different places because I love doing collaborative and collective work. I guess I will say the one that does stick out to me is I am with a few other local Black leaders, queer leaders, part of the Queer Partnership for Black Liberation. And we are working with elected officials and community members and leaders around public safety and really making sure there's integrity in this approach to reimagining public safety.
Excellent. Thank you, LaShawn.
Yeah, this is always tricky considering the things that you do that matter to you. Obviously, the first and foremost is my role with Franklin County Children's Services. We are the largest child welfare organization in the state of Ohio. And I have the good fortune of serving as the Assistant Director and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. But beyond my day job, the other affiliations that I'm most proud of, and this is apologizing in advance for those that I might leave off, is that I'm currently a board member for the African American Leadership Academy, where I'm also a fellow. I am also a member of the Equity Now Coalition, where I serve as the co-chair of our education work group. I am the co-board chair of the Columbus Afrocentric Advisory Board. I am on the board for the Impact Community Action, where I am the secretary of the board. And I also have the good fortune of serving on the United Way Planning and Investment Committee and on the core team for the Partnership for Success, which focuses on the academic and social emotional outcomes of young people, particularly through the lens of equity. And what I would say about all of those things is that what I hope to offer is the perspective of my lived experience, but then also an access to the understanding that Black people in Columbus are not monolithic. We have a wide array of lived experiences that, my representation only is just one component of that, in that when someone like myself is a representative on that board, that does not mean that the box is fully checked. You still have work that you need to do to gain access into that community and understand the lived experiences and the things that make up the tapestry of that community. And so that's why and how I came to be a part of those organizations and the perspectives that I hope to offer when we do our work.
That was great. Thank you so much all for sharing that information and laying a little groundwork about why we asked you to be a part of this panel. I might skip around a little bit with some of the questions that I did share with you in advance because I think something that Aaron and Sean both brought up are relationships. And I also know, Lena, and just as you were describing your work with Trans Ohio, the importance of building those strong relationships. So if you all could talk a little bit more about how dynamic relationships and trust help guide the work that you're doing with these groups, and whether they're with these formal groups or these more grassroots sort of community-based work. Talk a little more about those relationships.
I'll start, or Aaron, I saw you going. You can go ahead, Aaron. I'll just hop in off of you.
Okay. I'm sure many of us grew up hearing like it's about who you know, right? In terms of getting into really anything. Columbus is definitely that kind of city where it's about who you know, but I like it to take a step further and make it's about the relationships, because we all can know of each other and know people. And there's something so sacred though about being able to pick up the phone and call Sean or Lena and be like, yo, this is going on. What are your thoughts? Or I need your help here in a way, or can I bounce these ideas off of you? And then there's also, there's these people here in the city, in our community, who I will say yes to no matter what. And I think we all have those people, and we have to have those people. And so I know who my yes people are, and I know who I'm going to say yes to, and I know who I'm going to be like, I don't know, or what about so-and-so? But then also people who I can trust to either pass something along to or pass something along to me if needed as well. And so it's this this interdependence and this idea of how we're all connected. To me, we're in a place where it goes one step further than just knowing somebody's name or having been to a meeting with them. It is truly knowing, and that's where trust, you can have disagreement, you can have the hard conversation, but those things exist in a relationship because that's where repair is. So it's not transactional. I think that's the point getting at. It's not this transactional, I did something for Lena, so Lena's gonna do something for me. It's, I know Lena and something's coming up that doesn't sound like Lena. So I might contact Lena and say, yo, somebody's saying this. I don't know why I'm saying yo right now, but hey, somebody is saying this. Being at home, saying this about you, I just wanted to clarify it, or I want to, or, need your help with this. And so it goes beyond the transaction. It goes beyond what you can get out of it. And it goes into the humanity and the dignity of all of us.
And thanks, Aaron. And what I'll say to kind of piggyback off of that is, I don't know where I got it from the lexicon, but it's out there. But my philosophy in this regard is change happens at the speed of trust. And inside of trust is that tiny space where grace lives. And that's where mistakes happen, where flexibility is our path to transformation. And so what I would say is that the hard work of good relationships start with the process of developing trust. So, it's really all about, when you are establishing trust with someone, inherent in that is some vulnerability. You're handing off some things that matter to you, and you're determining whether or not they're going to be careful with it. And if they demonstrate the ability to be careful with those things that make you most comfortable, then it fosters more trust and more relationships, and it takes you deeper into rapport. And I think the way that I advocate and engage in the community is that people have put some things in my hand that I have to take care of. I am holding on to that trust with great sensitivity, because I recognize that I'm holding some trust. And so my good care of that, my thoughtful care of that trust is going to engender more trust and more abilities to do the things that I hope lead to community transformation.
Absolutely. The phrase, the speed of trust, has been really important the last couple of months in terms of protests and movement making and building. A lot of folks have been sort of thrown together by circumstance, people showing up in the streets in reaction to the police murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others. And a lot of these folks, to Aaron's point, might have known of each other in some sense. But a lot of the folks are also new, that they wouldn't necessarily be gravitating to the same kind of spaces that, for example, I, as an academic who works at a university, and often in those spaces, but rather folks who are showing up and are doing the work and have been doing the work for decades in the ways that oftentimes go unrecognized. And so the speed of trust has been important. And not to overemphasize, but to be quite clear, in some of this, that's a security question. If you don't know everyone's who is around you, and to be quite clear, Columbus Division of Police is looking to identify anyone they can who has attended any protest and target them with a warrant and arrest. That hasn't made the news a ton, but there's some articles out there if you want to educate yourself about it. It can be hard to move at the speed of trust when you are trusting so much to someone, including someone just knowing that you're physically present in a space that can be considered dangerous. And at the same time, as a white person, to recognize how much it needs to be showing up and doing good work and supporting people of color, because otherwise there's no reason for folks to trust me. Because folks like me have not necessarily always built trust and done that kind of work. So a lot of that has also been things like remembering it doesn't matter who you are or where you've been, how long you've been in the city, how much you've done, et cetera, et cetera. You have to be doing the work that is asked for by the leaders. So when people of color who are leading rallies say we need someone to pick up 15 folding chairs from this church that's loaning them, and we need them to be at the State House and we need them set up at that time, that's the work that needs done, and that no one is too good to pick up the trash after an event, and that folks who are still moving at the speed of trust have to work for that and have to gain it and justify it. But it is all about relation. And a lot of that is repairing harm when it happens as well. For some of us, our communities are pretty small. I'll say with Trans Ohio, one of the difficulties is that the transgender community in Ohio is not particularly large and it's geographically disparate. And so to be able to work together, even when we have differences of opinions in terms of strategies or end goals or ways to handle internal conflict. And that can be really difficult, but trying to restore trust when it's been broken. And that sometimes that means if folks are not willing to restore trust and not put in that effort, that sometimes you have to make the hard choice not to engage with them again as well for your own preservation, and then pick up the communication again when that is something that is mutual and that folks are able and willing to engage in. But that's I think one of the hard parts is recognizing it gets really messy sometimes and just embracing that mess and doing the best you can.
I want to add to, the grace that lives inside of trust is just so beautiful. And I wrote that down and I'm probably going to start saying it and I'll credit you, but it's just so, it's just beautiful. It's a place of pause and a place, like you said, where the mistakes happen or the misunderstandings. And also there is so much work to be done to repair and heal and build up our communities. We've got to be in relationship for that to happen. We can't be in our silos. We can't, want to be territorial. We've got to be in relationship to make all the wheels go together so that we can have this world that we envision that is possible.
Yeah, and I would say that when you do that, right, the results feel earned, and that's what's beautiful about this work.
Great reflection, everybody, and definitely lots of nuggets. I know I'm just keeping an eye on the chat here, and I know Melanie pointed out change happens at the speed of trust. I think that phrase also really resonates with us, and especially when we're trying to do work that involves the community, you've got to make sure that you are establishing trust and doing whatever the showing up is to be trustworthy and to uphold yourself in a behavior that is deemed trustworthy by the community. And that's where I kind of want to go next in our conversation is once those relationships are established and you've got some trust with grace weaved in, if you all could talk a little bit more about the needs of the community that come to light and that bubble up as you have built that relationship and have built that, done the hard work and having that commitment. Lena, how about we start with you? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's quite all right. I think some of that is moving beyond transactionalism. So I've always been deeply uncomfortable with the phrase networking, and not just because I'm an introvert and shy by nature and have learned to show up in other ways, but that a lot of the time that is how folks unintentionally might approach this work, and that a lot of the time folks can pick up on that dynamic, and it can really affect those relationships. To the point that Erin was making earlier of it's not, there's the folks that you say yes to and the folks that you might hand off things to. And now that I've been on that tangent, I've already forgotten where I was going in terms of what the underlying question was. Can you jog my memory? My apologies.
No, you're fine. Absolutely. I think what you said was all related. No problem. I just want to tie it back to the needs of the community. So where we go from building that trust and that relationship to the needs.
Thank you. Yes. I think a lot of that is folks, it's really difficult for folks to be vulnerable and share what is actually needed, especially if it is hidden and not well known, and especially if it feels deeply, deeply personal, because at the end of the day, these are all human beings who are working towards change. And yes, we might be affiliated with organizations that need things like funding or staff support. And yes, also, we might need to articulate something that we're working on in our personal life, such as, in my case, my goal right now is learning how to set boundaries and enforce them, even if people don't want to respect them. And that's something I've had to bring into these spaces and be very clear with colleagues. So the folks at Trans Ohio know that I've taken a step back for a hot minute because I need some space and to build those boundaries. And folks have been incredibly respectful of not hitting me up at late hours to ask for my advice and saying, like, we understand you're on hiatus. Love for you to be fully active again when you can. But the only reason I was able to articulate that and express that was because of a deep trust of working with those folks very closely. And the fact that we are very open about having our laundry out on the streets in the sense that we are clear with one another about what is happening in our lives and what we do and don't have capacity for. I don't necessarily engage in that level of direct communication around my personal needs in other spaces where that kind of trust hasn't been built. And I don't know for sure that that vulnerability will be honored. So something I'm learning to do is to lead with my own vulnerability as much as I can, and I'm willing to share that, and then let people reflect it back, because it turns out almost everyone has something going on that they're going to have a hard time identifying that need. But without identifying that need, the work itself can't get done because it's people who are doing the work at the end of the day.
I can jump right in without, needing to restate the question, because I think, because this one is always important for me personally, because it's so a couple things about trust from my perspective in the community and that I'm in relationship with is depending on the constituents that you're serving, you bring with you some trust and some credibility. And that's usually based on identity and lived experience. And it's this whole body of work around kind of this notion of the trust bank. The more degrees of difference we are from each other, the more work we have to do to create the trust. And if that's true, then what's also true is that honoring the voice and lived experiences of those you serve is important in terms of developing that trust. And what that really means is stripping away the assumptions that you might have and replacing it with a thoughtful curiosity that will open up the pathway to learning. And then how you gain the ultimate trust is by then acting on what you learn and taking that information, being careful with it, and then applying that in a way that is in full recognition that you didn't come up with it. You learned that from engagement and activity, and now you are deploying it on behalf of a constituency that you care so deeply about. And I think that last step is what sometimes is missing, because what might become true is that if you skip the process of saying, I learned this from you and now I am doing this, without being clear of that relationship between the learning and the doing, it might feel as though you invented the wheel when in reality, someone handed that to you because they trusted you with it. And so you have, instead of reading your own press clippings, you got to figure out that no, there's a feedback loop. I learned this because I engage with the community. And so that then becomes the information I've used to then do this work. And I think, at least that's for me, is how I've weaved in community needs into my work, is that, it's part of that process, and it's reciprocal in nature. Because I think reciprocity is the trump card, of lack of a poor word, of transaction, right? Because, there is a component of reciprocity in the definition that is connected to transaction, but I think there's the reciprocal nature of how we learn things and do things is an important aspect to how you grow and foster trust in any kind of trusting relationship.
Yes, to both. I'm thinking this from two perspectives. One, so I'm a social worker, my 20th year, and finishing my 20th year. And, the biggest thing is like meeting people where they're, not the biggest thing, but like meeting people where they're at. You don't just go into a community and make change. You just don't go into somebody's home and make change. You have to like build rapport, and you do an assessment, and you get to know them, and you get to develop shared language. And I think that approach is beneficial anywhere where you are showing up to either collaborate or inspire change. And so I think that's in a relationship, and being able to build relationships, and being able to do it in a way that's quick and efficient and has a good foundation. And so I can't just, if I'm working with a client one-to-one, I can't just jump right in and ask all their personal business. I can, but I'm not going to get what I need if I'm not building that relationship and laying that foundation of being seen and that mutuality. But I also think needs emerge in a relationship. And so we can list what's happening in our local community, and I think there's some very obvious needs, but in relationship with actual communities. So again, taking out the transactional nature of just showing up for one time or one thing, but like building those relationships, being embedded in the community, knowing people, loving people, all these things, like other needs get to emerge there. And they're typically, I don't want to say the real or actual needs, but they're like the core needs. So there's a lot of things that we can do and put Band-Aids on and fix and do, what's considered like higher level change or higher level attention. But if we're not meeting the core needs of people and communities, it's just the cycles are going to continue anyway. So we've got to get in there and build those relationships for that truth and honesty to exist.
Some really great thoughts. I know a couple pieces that I definitely that resonated on top of everything, but I love the articulation of the needs and knowing that that's a vulnerable place, right? So that you've got to do that groundwork once, and to be able to find out what those true needs are, you've got to make sure that the relationship and that there is a foundation of true understanding. And I think there's also some self-awareness that has to go with that. Lena, I think you spoke to that. I think you've got to look inside to make sure that you check your intentions. Why did I come here? What do I get out of it? Because everything is there's reciprocity. Sean, as you brought up, you've got to be upfront and very honest about what your intentionality is for being there and what you have to offer, which I think is brilliant. Well said. Well said. Erin, did you want to add something else?
I did, because I was thinking like, so we can have all these great ideas. I'm like, how does this actually apply to my real life in another way? And so like at Kaleidoscope, we serve young people, 12 to 24. And we say that we are youth-led and youth-informed. That's real, and that is really hard sometimes, because I like to think I have a lot of great ideas, and sometimes they're not, because they're not what the youth think are great ideas, or they're not what they actually need. And so I think when you become participatory in the engagement, so it's not just me as I'm the ED, this is my vision for the organization, I have the heart of the youth and things that I'm doing, and I need to be in contact and relationship with my team and with the young people, and like what's really fueling them, we get to hear what their needs are, what their vision is, and then our responsibility and responsiveness is to build around that. And I think that's just a really It's a real world example, and it has to be done behind closed doors. It can't just be in name or when it looks good or when it's easy. Like, it's got to be at the center. Like at our staff meeting on Monday, we were talking about something, and we centered like, how do we get the youth input around this? And so we're all on the same page with that. So I think, and the last thing I'll say is, like, I personally have such a deep love for my community and for the young people. And so I think love is used in so many different ways, and I'm in a really soft space at this time of my life. But I, probably 2011, I was on the Trans Ohio board. I think I had started there. And before that, I was building relationships in the community. And I've had people, like say I'm a trans ally or an advocate, all these things. But the reality is people I love are being harmed and hurt. I don't care what name you put on it, but not on my watch. And whatever I can do in this world, whether it's through trainings or providing space or funding or whatever it is, I'm going to do that because people I love are being harmed. And I want to invite that into our community conversations. Like, what about the people we love? How can we be in a place of not on my watch? And then find out those needs and then be a stand with and for the people that we say we're serving.
Very powerful, Erin. Thank you. I feel like I need that on something, not on my watch. And I think that's a good call to action for all of us to think about. I think we did have something pop up in the chat. So let's take a look there. We've got a question from Ryan. How can institutions be better at including communities they serve in their decision-making or how they act? Does anyone do that well? And can you think about a success that you've had in your involvements where you feel like you've accomplished that?
I would say that it's really about intentionality and putting those markers in your process where you are checking in with your constituents, and whether it be formal ways like inviting them or representation to meetings, or less formal ways like surveying and focus groups and ways to bring in community feedback. You have to be intentional in how those things play into your process. Many organizations take it on in many different ways. Exemplars are out there in terms of, I think of one of the organizations that I have the good fortune of serving on the board of is Impact Community Action. And the executive director, Bo Chilton, does a great job of interacting with their customer, interacting and having conversations, and then taking that information and bringing it back to agency leadership and the board. These are the things that I'm hearing. And then that information has no choice but to inform how you do your work and how you set up the structures and the policies that then govern the agency. And I think downstream, it will play into your outcomes. And so I would say interacting with your customer, as well as, having formal ways in which you get that information is a good way to think about how to do that.
I think one thing that I always find myself returning to is a tweet by a trans scholar I really admire. Her name is Z Nicolazzo, at Trans Killjoy, if you want a good thought-provoking follow. But something that Dr. Nicolazzo has articulated is that additive forms of diversity and approaches to inclusion don't actually transform systems of power. So in other words, adding another seat at the end of the table does not actually redistribute power to the folks who are allegedly being invited in. So rather, what does it look like for us to really interrogate how our organizations have been operating, and not simply add someone who has an identity that is shared with clients, but rather thinking about how are we making our decisions in the first place? How do we make sure we're not tokenizing the one person of color or the one trans person by asking them to be on our board, but not compensating them, for example? So in Trans Ohio's case, it's a working board. Everyone who's on the board of directors, as opposed to making a financial gift to the organization, actually is the folks who are on the ground doing the work, implementing the programming, in addition to making the 30,000-foot decisions. How can we just ask and say, you know, we really would like more people of color to serve on this board? How can we ask that of folks if we're not compensating people for their time? How can we say, please give us all of this labor? Please share with us your situated and subjugated knowledges, and what you get in return is a line on your resume. That's not equitable. And so those kinds of positions are disproportionately accessible to folks like myself who are fortunate to have a salaried job. So yeah, I can go and do that on the weekends, but how can we make sure to pay people for their labor and to radically reconceptualize what that would look like in terms of not just adding seats to the table, but making the organization actually for and by the folks that are most directly affected by the issues, and doing that through an intersectional lens of making sure I'm just that annoying white person who's always making everything about race at any meeting and just always saying like, oh, okay, like I understand why this would be good for the LGBTQ community on the whole, but my question is what might be the racial disproportionalities and how this affects people? Because if we're only doing LGBTQ work without paying attention to race and racism, then we're doing rainbow white supremacy. And just like making it really clear that that's what's at stake, and holding folks accountable when they have said they have the intention to do things like redistribute power, but making sure that the follow-up is there, even if it makes you the annoying person in the room.
Yeah, I believe in, yes, standing with both of them, and I believe in representative leadership. And we've got to have people who are in leadership on our boards and the executive suite, C-suite, whatever we want to call it these days, that actually represents our community. And so an example of this, not my current board, but some previous board members, I've been really advocating to make sure there are youth voices on our board as voting members. And the response was, do you want the youth to vote on your salary? And I said, yes, I do. Absolutely. Because if I'm not doing my job, I shouldn't be here. And that's uncomfortable. And generationally, that's not what we're used to. There's a whole lot of layers and nuance to that. But at the end of the day, absolutely. And that also means I don't just need to get to know them. They need to get to know me. And so like Sean was saying about Bo, like, yeah, like I walk through our drop-in center. I spend time. I make sure that I'm not the person who's, if something's going wrong, holding people accountable, if somebody else can do it, because I don't want to be that person. But we've got to include that representation, and it can't just be, as Lena says, like in name only or just for a picture. Like it's got to be inclusive. It's the diversity that makes a difference. It goes a step further. So making sure that's there, and then just be in the community. At the end of the day, I don't know. I don't even care what community it is or who you're serving, the population. Like you've got to immerse yourself in it and build those relationships and stop being transactional and stop thinking that we know what's best for people. And it's a difference. It's more collaborative. I see my work with the young people, even with my team, because I work within my own community. Like we're collaborative in this. It's collaborative leadership. I understand why hierarchy exists. I get it. I understand all those things for accountability, and we're all in this together. And I think the more that we can, start to function from this, the ideal of none of us are free until all of us are free. And like my liberation is tied up in your liberation. That is even in leadership. And that's even at the top of an agency. That's for the community that we're serving.
I feel like this round was some great truth bombs dropped right now. So I appreciate you guys. And oh my goodness, the situated and subjugated knowledge, that rocked. We might have to talk offline about that, because that was great. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All credit to Black women in critical race theory for those terms.
Awesome. It was a great callback. I loved it. It was awesome. So kind of going back to that, and I think bringing up some of these conversations that you all are having and making sure that your work and your community involvement is being around total approach and having collaborative, Erin, as you said, and making sure that the collaboratively, would you say your liberation is, say it one more time, Erin, that was great. Your liberation is tied
to yours. None of us are free until all of us are free, and my liberation is tied up in your liberation. It's
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So and that brings me to a question here. So many people right now they're working and trying to find ways to organize and support racial justice and equity work. Based on your experience, what advice beyond keeping these kind of self check-ins and having these sort of maybe being a part of a panel like this and listening and making sure that they're being true to their selves and their community, but what other advice would you be able to give to someone who's looking to collaborate in a grassroots community leadership kind of way?
Well, I'll jump in on this and say that first, Lena, shots to you, because I was getting some major Kimberly Crenshaw, Audre Lorde vibes hearing you riff on on critical race theory. So shouts to you. But so what I would say to your question, Asia, is critical self-reflection is an important component of advocacy and agency. You have to understand your why, and you have to be clear about your why, and how you articulate that and how you do that in relationship, going back to earlier conversation, will be important when you engage others who are doing this work, or when you engage the community in which you are of service. And so it's just, to me, fundamental. It's kind of how I start my day. I start my day in critical self-reflection. I end my day in critical self-reflection, because I think it helps me understand better whether or not I achieved what I set out at the beginning and end of each day, right? It's just really taking that inventory of what it is that you want to accomplish, why it is that you want to accomplish that thing, and then how you go about doing it, and whether or not it meets the needs based on the clear expression of others. And you have to have a mechanism for reflecting on that, and a strategy, whether it be journaling or some other form of critical self-reflection that will allow for you to take stock into how you go about doing this work.
I love that, getting clear about your why. And for me, I also like to, getting clear about the truth about who I am and what I'm bringing to the table. And those are all tied in with each other. I think I'll also say too is show up and do the work. I think there's this, I want to do this, I want to do that, or, this is my passion, like show up and do the work. I always tell folks, don't show up to be a leader. Don't set out to be a leader, just do the work. That's leadership to me in and of itself. There's different names and roles of leaders, which you can get to. But I think if that's your goal, then your why is completely different than showing up to do the work out of that space of love.
Absolutely. And a lot of that is doing your internal work before you show up in public spaces. So it's not like you have to reach self-actualization on the Maslow hierarchy of need to come out to a fundraiser or a community event, but rather, are you making sure that you are knowledgeable of what is actually facing a community when they are advocating for things? I'll be a little bit more direct and name things for what they are. For white people who are maybe newer to anti-racism work and racial justice, we have to be educating ourselves and not burdening people of color with unpaid labor to catch us up on what's been going on for a couple hundred years, right? So there's a thought piece just a few weeks ago that basically said when Black people are being killed by police, white people join book clubs. And the argument was, it's not that it's bad to have a book club about white fragility and related topics, but you also have to show up and do the work, like Erin was saying, and not just showing up and asking, what can I do, and centering yourself, but showing up and saying, here are things I have to contribute. Would anything else be helpful? And come with those concrete ideas and offers. If you can donate $50 a month to a grassroots bail fund, it might seem small to you if $50 is relatively minor. To the bail fund, it makes a huge difference. But show up and say, like, I have these skill sets, or I have this equipment that I can offer to borrow you, or I have this amount of funding that I could channel your way, or I know these people who I can connect you to. And then finally, staying in your lane. That's specifically for folks who do have the dominant identity. Like, white folks, stay in our lane. It's not our place to be leaders of racial justice movements. We should be like educating other white people. That's a good way to stay in your lane, is to talk to your friends and family who are white, who are also maybe just now starting to realize how bad white supremacy really is in 2020 still, and doing that rather than getting on a megaphone downtown, because that's really not your lane. Black people got this.
So can I add, because I agree with you, Lena, but there's another piece of that I wanted to tease out just a little bit for this conversation, because I think that we talk often about safe spaces, and what that usually is a manicured safe space where the expression of power is the precondition. And so people create these safe spaces for themselves where they are still in some way in power. And the trade-off is, how do you then leverage your privilege that creates or fosters a safe space where someone else is in power? And what that means then, Lena, is I don't need the microphone or the megaphone, or if I am a cisgender Black gay male, I don't need the megaphone, but I do need to be there. So because what my presence does is it offers more safety for those who are incredibly vulnerable. So for those white people who have the book club, bring the entire book club also to the protest, because just because you're there, that space is going to now be 1% more safe for those who are incredibly vulnerable. So it's just an important transition from the manicured safe space to the inherently unsafe space, but how your presence can increase the safety for others who are perpetually unsafe.
Great thoughts, and I'm going to keep going, I think, on that, if that's okay. I want to know what you all think individually, and then also as it represents, your work that you're doing in the community. But what do you think of our community's racial justice journey? And based on your experience these last few months, love to know just kind of where, I know you all are plugged into. This is a big question. I probably shouldn't have waited till we had 9 minutes, but I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear you all kind of tease that out a little bit.
The journey. I love you. My daughter's going to work. I think what I'll say, what I am very aware of right now in this journey is that for the first time that I've been alive or around and conscious, my internal and felt sense and my familial experience is being reflected in a public way. And there's something validating and vulnerable and terrifying in that. Yeah, I mean, that's it. It's out there and it's being reflected. And I'm like, yes, when I was 9, that happened. Yes, absolutely.
Asia, this is one of those questions that the question begs for optimism, but the reality is that there's not a lot to be optimistic about. So inherently, it's difficult to answer this question when you're trying to be authentic in your engagement. because the journey, the question in itself would suggest that there's this tangible progress that has been made. And the reality is that we are still in this point of reckoning that is very much just about recognition. And so my experience in this point has been riddled with stops and starts, because it's been a lot about introducing the conversation, feeling progress, and then something else happening that's saying, no, we are still very much on the initial square. And so I would say that I agree with the philosophical stance that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, but I would say that we're still on step one.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you being authentic about what answering that question can look like. I think some of my thinking around this is shaped by, there's a historian named Dr. Carol Anderson. She wrote a book named White Rage. And basically the thesis for folks who haven't read it is that every time Black folks in this country make any kind of progress, white rage is the backlash through policy and interpersonal violence. We are living through a backlash of extremely clear white supremacy, as opposed to when it gets a little bit quieter and more insidious, but is still here. I mean, just last night, the sitting president of the United States asked for a white supremacist hate group, the Proud Boys, to be on standby. So we are living in the throes of white supremacy. This is probably the loudest it's been in many decades. And it's barely even the first step, right? As folks are saying, Malcolm X talked about, like, you know, if you stab me in the back with a knife 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, that's not progress. And that America won't even admit that the knife is there, much less that it's in the backs of people of color. And so I think we're right now getting to the point where a critical mass of white folks are finally being forced to reckon with the fact that there is a knife, there has always been a knife, and that we are part of the problem in allowing it to stay there. And at the same time, the level of white helplessness of, like, how do I do something, is maybe also at an all-time high. So I think it's a special moment of, like, it's very clear people cannot ignore this. And at the same time, the rage is real and the backlash is real, and we have to support each other and get as many of us through this moment as we can. And I think that's maybe the best goal that we can hope for right now. I am an eternal pessimist because I'm a historian, so I should contextualize that. But I think doing what we can in terms of, like, mutual aid, supporting each other and having these conversations is going to make a real tangible difference in individual people's lives right now.
I think too, and this is no shade to you, Asia, but, like, to say journey romanticizes what's happening. Like, this is life. And it's, I don't know, I was doing a training facilitation yesterday, and we were talking about code switching and police and all that. And, like, I was worn out. It was 3 hours, 15 minutes. And, like, I was worn out in a way that I haven't been in a long time in training. And it was a lot of white folks. And it's this, to even talk about, like, where I have to go to be able to do that work, to any of us have to go to do it, to not over explain, to not, you know, dig into this proving, to also, like, have some type of, I don't know, compassion. I'm not sure what we're supposed to do. Like, it's just, it's so messy and it hurts. Like, it hurts and it's terrifying. And I don't enjoy having to witness a journey of our community while also experiencing the journey.
Well said, Erin. And I definitely agree. The code switching and whistleblowing are definitely a part, I think, more part of what we are experiencing and how we are dealing with multiple layers of what's going on. So I 100% agree. And thank you for that call out. Thank you. Thank you. I see we've got 3 minutes left, and thank you all for sharing all of that. And I might be optimistic, maybe a little balance there, which is good. Maybe it's sometimes blindly, but I am excited, and just by having this conversation and by being a part of being able to meet the three of you. I'm so glad that our paths have crossed, and I've appreciated all of the knowledge you've dropped. And I'm glad that this is being recorded live on YouTube for later consumption. And I hope that people do take advantage of that. Any last questions or remarks we want to share in these last 60 seconds? Or we got 2 minutes actually, so that's great.
I just want to thank you and United Way and your people there and your leadership for holding and creating space for these types of conversations. Like, these are the things we need to be doing. And so I just want to thank you for the leadership organizationally for this platform.
And I would say that there's nothing wrong, and there's absolutely space for optimists. They actually are needed in this work, because it is the optimists that can recharge those who are feeling the drain of this work. And but what I would also say is that for those of you that are engaged in this work and are doing it every single day, take the moment to pause. Take the moment for critical self-reflection, and understand that the work that you're doing is going to always require your efforts and your energy, but the prevailing sentiment should always be to your personal and individual mental health and stability. And so what things you need to do, and Lena mentioned earlier, how do you protect that space so that you can do that? It's an important thing that I think Lena, when they said it earlier, it may have felt like a throwaway line as part of a bigger narrative, but I caught it, and I hung on to that, because that's not necessarily something that I do a good job at. And so just wanted to make sure that I called that out, because, you know, I think they represented something that was incredibly important for us.
I get a lot of learning from Twitter, to be quite honest. And an activist friend recently made a comment, something about, you know, organizing work and engagement in community is just a bunch of organizers and volunteers texting each other constantly. Have you eaten? Have you had water? Have you slept? While not having done those things themselves. So I really appreciate you re-emphasizing that and pointing that out, Sean. And want to invite everyone on the call, especially if you have been doing the good work and this is, you know, further opportunity for you to connect and find more ways of giving. To remember to put on your own life vest first before you assist others. And a reminder to yourself that it's not only because you're valuable to the world and to your community, it's because you're valuable in and of yourself. So many times in these kinds of giving spaces, I hear things like, well, if you burn out, then you can't keep contributing and we've lost someone. That's true. And at the same time, your well-being is more important than your contribution to an organization. And so do it for yourself first and foremost, and that's not selfish. It's actually just really good self-care and community care.
Yes, and I put some simple ways for self-reflection to happen are those 3 elemental questions. If you ask yourself those 3 elemental questions, you are putting yourself in position for critical self-reflection.
Well, thank you. Thank you all so much again. And thanks to our panelists and everyone for joining. Please check out the rest of our events and volunteer when you have time. We've got some other opportunities. And our final call to action for you, those listening out there, is volunteer to create impact, advocate for justice, and promote philanthropy by giving to United Way of Central Ohio. And remember, because what we do together today determines how we live united tomorrow. Thank you all. Thank you.